Hello, my name is Joy Ashby Cornthwaite, and I will be your host for this, the 30th episode of the live stream show, MyDiabetesHQ Live. Last week, we had 3 amazing diabetes champions and advocates on the show to bring in the new year and share how they've shifted the ideas of goal setting towards successes and away from absolutes. They shared moving recollections of challenges and valuable learnings, which have guided them towards a more personalized and meaningful diabetes journey. Stay tuned to hear how these diabetes education care specialists that we have today on the show plan to continue to listen and hear their patients living with diabetes and how listening informs the way they care. Today's episode is coming up right now. You don't want to miss this. Before we begin, a gentle reminder, the content shared during the MyDiabetesHQ Live broadcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding diabetes or any chronic disease. This weekly broadcast is developed and produced by Cities Changing Diabetes volunteers in Houston and Philadelphia. Our 2 cities are the U.S. members of a global network of 36 cities working to improve diabetes prevention, care, and management around the world. You can learn more about Cities Changing Diabetes by going to citieschangingdiabetes.org. The purpose of this live stream is to help people living with diabetes and their support teams. And today we're talking about lived diabetes experiences informing diabetes care and education. Leave a comment, share where you are located, and don't be shy. Join our conversation. So let's welcome our panelists. I'm really honored to have 3 amazing people here with me today. We have first Michelle Taub. She's a certified diabetes care and education specialist and she's board certified in advanced diabetes management. Hi, good morning, Michelle.
Hi, good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. And second, we have Cheryl Wolf. She's also a certified diabetes care and education specialist.
Hi, good morning.
And we have Tiara Smith. Good morning,
everyone. Good morning.
She's an educator and a senior manager of Beyond Type 2, a resource website for people impacted by type 2 diabetes. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I also live with diabetes.
Awesome. So as an aside, I just want to highlight, since I've said it many, many times, you'll have to quiz me on how to say it 3 times really fast. But what a diabetes educator change to diabetes care and education specialist, because inquiring minds want to know. So we've changed our title to Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. The association announced official title change about a year ago, and it's more reflective of the roles that we play as clinicians in integrating clinical and self-management aspects of care. The former president, Karen Kemmis, said, while diabetes education will always be a part of what we do, it is not all we do. So today, as we listen together and we hear and reflect the conversation of our 3 diabetes champions from last week, we want to highlight and celebrate how their openness and willingness to share their story really influences the way that we care for people. So let's start with you ladies. Let's start with a personal reflection of your roles as educators and what all of this really means, taking in our title and what it means for us to be part of a collaborative team. Cheryl, let's start with you. Oh, I'll unmute you.
Oh, sorry about that. It's kind of funny because right at the time when I became licensed as a diabetes educator, when it was still the same name, a couple months later, it became the CDCES, and I was like, no, they just changed it on me. But I really think it truly embodies what we do as certified diabetes care and education specialists. We're not just educators. While that's a huge part of what we do in our consult is educating people living with diabetes. We're specialists in the field. We know so much about diabetes. We work with patients every day, care teams. We study it, we research it. It's just as much a part of our lives, for our patients as well. And that care component really for me is an umbrella of everything, we do, whether it's helping patients cope, with new disease, new things that they've learned or a change in their care, insurance issues, diet, exercise, everything, that goes along with diabetes management. And I see it really as how we help patients navigate through disease management. So instead of getting from point A to point B, I always love to go into a session, a consult with a person living with diabetes, knowing that it's going to be really about connecting the dots, really about moving kind of in their way and getting them involved in their care, and individualizing their care and making sure this isn't just diabetes care and education specialist oriented or doctor oriented care, that they're truly a part of what they want to work on and how they want to improve their self-care.
Agreed. Thank you, Cheryl. That's all very important points. And also the care component speaks to me too. What do you all say, Michelle and Tara? Tiara, sorry.
So, I think I agree with what Cheryl said too. I think the biggest part is the care portion, making sure that patients know that while we're there to help them learn the skills that are necessary for diabetes care, we're also there as an advocate. So making sure that we're an advocate for the rest of the team as well. So making sure we're letting the doctors know where the patient's at and the rest of the care team as well. So I think it's important that we fulfill that role as well.
And I agree with everything that Cheryl and Michelle just said, and I'll even harp more on the patient advocacy side. I think in my role, I try to empower patients to use their voices. I think it's very important for patients with diabetes who may feel intimidated by going to an educator or to the doctor's office to, be prepared with questions and to be honest about some of the things that they are having issues with, and also not feeling ashamed if they feel like they're having issues with some common things like, portion sizes or, nutrition or exercise, that no problem is too small if it matters to them. So being very open about what's in their best care and being able to voice that, I think, is an important part of being in a collaborative environment and being able to inspire clinicians and professionals to allow their patients to create a safe space for their patients to be able to voice some of their opinions.
That's wonderful. So I am a family member. A lot of you know I'm a family member. I love people who very dearly and very close to me who live with diabetes. And I'm also, it's what, motivated me to become a diabetes specialist. And so when I'm listening and I'm hearing you all talk about truly partnering with your patients and with their family members and with their care teams, I think that you all embody this position and honor the trust that we've been given, right, by people. Partnering takes listening, it takes hearing, it takes being sensitive and perhaps a little bit vulnerable ourselves to say, perhaps, I don't know all the answers. I am your educator. I don't live with you all the time. I am here to motivate you. I'm here to advocate for you, but I need to know what you know so that I can do it, and what you want to know and what you need to know. And so I asked the three of you to take a look at the clips from last week's powerful session on SMART goal setting with Reva Verma, Miss Marguerite Butler, and Serena Valentine. And here are a couple of really great clips that y'all chose from that session. And we're going to begin with one of Cheryl's top picks.
You know, and I see so often, even in peer support, that the motivation is a complication or a few complications. That's exactly what happened to me. 2017, I had a list of 11, count it, y'all, 11 diagnoses that stemmed from diabetes. And my body was just out of there. I was so ill, I could not get out of bed. That was my motivation every day, seeing my son walk in my room in his own way, telling me good morning. And I'm like, I don't want to die. And I hear that so often in peer support. It's like, you know, it would be nice to be motivated before your body gets to the point of experiencing a diabetes complication, but it doesn't always happen that way. And I hear a lot of them like, oh, well, now I need to do something because now I'm feeling bad.
So Cheryl, can you tell us how this particular clip, how what she's talking about resonated with you and why?
Yeah, Serena's clip was very, very powerful. And I think something we as diabetes care and education specialists experience so many times, you know, when people walk into our doors or over the phone at this point. And I think acknowledging Serena's fear to not want to die is so important, and to build trust with our patients, we have to acknowledge what they're saying. That's number one, because it's a natural response, you know, to wanting to, it's life-saving almost. I think fear as a motivator can be absolutely life-saving and give us that motivation and that push to kind of drive us forward. To make a change. And I think it's really important to acknowledge in those sessions and not to disregard when a patient is feeling scared and fearful. As a practitioner, I think that how we can channel that fear into successful habits is really important. And Joy, there was a quote from you last week that I really loved, and you said, motivation gets you started and habits are what keep you going. I thought that was really great, because I think at the end of the day, fear can also it can be hard to learn, and it can be hard in those situations when our brain is in a fearful state. We lose that ability to think and plan and act and figure out what our true needs are. And so I think as a care team, we need to be there to channel in and actually help our patients and people living with diabetes be able to channel that fear into daily habits, right? Because we know motivation has its ebbs and flows, right? It can be life-saving, but it doesn't always last, right? Just like anything we've ever started in the new years, you know, when we're motivated to do something, it doesn't always last. That spark kind of burns out at some point. Until we address it again, you know, a new consult, a new doctor's visit, a new A1C. And so I think as practitioners, we really need to acknowledge it, that Serena's fear and our patients' fears are true and normal and healthy, and how we can start moving and channeling that into successful daily habits, and maybe eventually as well also get away from fear-based approach to education, you know, when we're working with clients.
So I saw Tiara nodding her head like emphatically, especially at your last statement, in terms of moving away from, you know, from fear as a motivator, using it to develop habits. But then also something that doesn't get spoken about often is using fear as a treatment, you know, motivator. So Tiara, can you just, I saw your face, your smile light up, and can you just speak on that and how important that is?
Yeah, so I think, so conversations around fear and diabetes management, it's so tricky, at least like from what I see in the patient advocacy world. Because on one hand, you don't want patients to be afraid of their diabetes. You want them to be able to, kind of look at it honestly and kind of take it head on. But what Cheryl said about fear being a motivator is very real, and I can speak to that not only as a nutrition educator, but as a person with diabetes. I do not want to get complications, so I do try to do my best each day with one small habit, one small win that makes me feel good enough to want to carry that momentum into the next day. But um, if I feel too afraid, I guess, about my diabetes, then I can sometimes feel like I want to give up. And I think that's where that line is with patients. You don't want patients to feel hopeless. I think the fear of, suffering from health complications from diabetes is very real. It's a healthy reaction because diabetes is very serious. But at the same time, you don't want fear to paralyze you from trying new things to get your diabetes under your management or to reach your management goals.
Michelle?
Yeah, so I think Tiara and Cheryl made some excellent points about how fear correlates with diabetes education. And I think something that is a common theme is making sure as a diabetes educator, when the patient comes to see us, that we meet them wherever they're at and find out, are they feeling really scared? Are they feeling that fear? Because the last thing we would want to do is for a patient who is fearful just to be in that visit with us to then do like a fear-based education, trying to motivate them. For that patient, that's going to be a terrible experience. And they're not going to want to come back and see us because we didn't even address what they were feeling in that moment. So I think it's really important for us as the diabetes care and education specialist to take a moment, find out where that patient's at the beginning of the visit. And, like Cheryl said, she made a really great comment the other day when we were talking, and she said, the first thing you got to do is when that patient walks in is if they do feel fear, kind of knock it down. You got to address it. The best way to address anxiety and fear is to put it out in the open, So I really liked that statement. I think that really resonated with me. So I think, just finding out where our patients are at is vital in our education.
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing just to what Michelle said? And Michelle, you made me think of a type 1 patient who was on a complications panel that I watched a few months ago. And he's someone that I think he suffered from retinopathy. And he was someone that really had like a fear-based approach about that complication getting worse. But he said that he started to think of it as not just like taking care of his diabetes, but improving his eye health, instead of worrying about heart disease, improving heart health. And that was such a mindset shift, just using those words, using that language, that really stuck with me. And I think kind of reframing fear into more motivating language can help patients as well.
And I want to ask you all a question. So we may have educators who are watching this, and I know at the very beginning of my career there was a hesitancy as well to acknowledge fear, because once you acknowledge it, you have to do something with it, right? And I think as humans, we may ask someone, just think about walking down the street somewhere, and you say to someone, like, how you're doing. Your expectation is that they're going to say good, but what happens when they say not so good? Like, how do we deal with, how does someone, I've been doing this for a long time, and so it's comfortable for me. Like, I can go into that pocket with my patient and come back out very easily, I think. But what, are there some tips? Are there some ways to kind of approach it if for you as an educator it feels a little bit difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I think listening is the most important thing that we can do as any practitioner, whether we're a doctor, nurse practitioner, nurse. We have to listen, and whether we have experienced what they've experienced or not, we can empathize and we can listen to what they have to say. And I think as practitioners, we need to use more open-ended questions in our consults versus closed-ended yes or no questions. We don't learn a lot from that. And if we can dig a little deeper, as Joy always says, we're diabetes detectives at the end of the day. We're going to learn so much more about our people living with diabetes and what they're going through, because we have no idea what they're going through when they walk through that door. And if we give them that chance to speak and open up and empathize with them, then we're going to learn so much more about their care and individualizing it and making them more successful long term.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely one of the things that I use often is inside of the explanation of where that fear comes from, usually comes an explanation of a strength as well. So you can usually pick out a strength with someone and identify it because they may not even know they have that strength, right? And then out of that fear, you grab onto the strength and then you move forward. And so I'm always kind of looking for, sort of a transferable skill that someone has that they can transfer to their diabetes management. And oftentimes, we don't even realize that we have transferable skills from one thing to the other, something that we do really good in a space that we feel really comfortable, that we can bring to a space that we feel uncomfortable in, and then use that as well. So thank you, ladies. It's really, I love that we're having this conversation because I think it's so very necessary. So no matter the cause of the fear, conquering it and overcoming it and finding strength is a critical component of diabetes care and management. So let's go on. So now that we've conquered it, we found a strength. We're going to look at one of Michelle's top picks, which was Miss Butler's clip about the limitations when she began her journey.
Felt really was concerned about me because I really didn't believe that the other health professionals that I dealt with really were concerned about me. I felt like they were doing the job just so that they could get paid and go home and take care of their families, that it wasn't really about me. And therefore, I didn't trust anything that they had to say.
Okay. So, Michelle, I'll let you take this one away. And then, Tiara, I can tell that you just want to get in there. So we'll come to you in just a moment.
Yes. So I think this resonated with me a lot as a diabetes educator because I think what Ms. Butler had to say, I think a lot of patients really feel. I think when patients come into our office, they're fearful, and they're also not only fearful of their diabetes and complications like we were discussing earlier, but I think there's also a fear of judgment from the healthcare team. I think there's a lot of stigma associated with diabetes, and I think a lot of times our patients are feeling that. And so I think that's something that before, when a patient comes in for diabetes education, I think it's important that we take the time before we get into, going over knowledge and skill set to really try to build a rapport with the patient first and find out, where are they at? What are they thinking? And maybe what do they think of diabetes? What does it mean to them at this point before we move forward with all of that education? Because, I think one of the things we just talked about was active listening, right? So letting that patient express how they're feeling. And then, pulling from that what we're hearing and putting it out into the universe to say, well, that's not that crazy, actually, if you feel that way. I think it's important that our patients know that we're human too. I have family members with diabetes as well, and so we're not perfect. We do have extensive skill set and knowledge, but we're not perfect human beings either. And so I want to let my patients know that I got into this because I want to help those people. I do care about you. And I think it's important that we let our patients know that no matter how busy our schedule may be or or what we have planned for that day. I think the quality is very important over quantity. So I think letting patients know that we do care and starting to establish that trust is very important. No patient's going to trust us, I think 100% in that first visit, but I think starting to build that path is very important before we just hop into that education.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things about education is that you don't even know where to begin in your education process with that individual if you haven't heard them. So there's, trust is built with getting to know someone. So you do have to ask that question, who are you? Tell me a little bit about you, which I think at first sometimes when my wonderful people come in with their family members and I say, tell me a little bit about you, they're in shock, right? So on that other side, like it's okay to be, to have a conversation, have a little bit of small talk with me before we begin, because it's how we know how to begin. Because you may not need education or skill building in the exercise component. You may already be in that world. And so if I start telling you what you already do, but that's not what you need, then you've eroded trust because you've made assumptions. So what do you think?
I couldn't agree more. I think that you definitely have to build that trust. And I think, I work with mothers living with diabetes and in pregnancy. And, when they come in, there's a lot of fear walking into that room because it's not just about them. It's about, the health of their baby as well. And to be able to connect with them and talk about, their family history, are you having a boy or a girl? How many kids do you have? What are their ages? Are they in school? Just taking a couple minutes even, at the beginning of your consult to really connect with them, learn just a little bit more about who your patients are, and you're already finding out so much, about them. And then by building that trust, which is what you did with Miss Butler, Joy, when she came to see you and, you guys built that foundation, that trust, you were able to then figure out that she did need that education component, of what diabetes is and what's happening inside of your body. And then that was able to kind of project her forward in her care, because now she understood what it meant to have diabetes and what's happening and why diet makes a difference and why exercise makes a difference and medication taking and all these things, because you were able to build that trust and rapport and then find where she is and, where she is in her care and then move from there. And I think that was really important.
Yeah. And, to take it a little bit further, understanding the pattern. So like you said, if a mom has, she has a large family and everyone's, some kids are in online school or some kids are there at home, or she has little ones that she has to take care of, that all informs different strategies of different skills. So that, someone who is very busy with kids who are teenagers and who have, soccer or games or something like that on the weekend, you can't move into healthy eating, skill building by saying, well, now you've got to meal prep, because when are they going to meal prep? Like, it's not going to happen then. And so by by understanding a person, by hearing who they are, how their life responsibilities influence their diabetes self-care, you can dig into the very deep toolbox of skills that we as educators have to then pull out the thing that's exactly for them. Okay, so I know I used to love like Mary Poppins, right? And she would dig into her bag and just like pull out just whatever every single individual needed, right? And that's exactly what we do as education specialists. We pull out of our very deep toolbox all of the skills and all of the knowledge that we have to arise to the item that the person sitting in front of us needs right now, today. Not what we think they need, but we're pulling out of the bag what they actually need. And sometimes they're surprised, like, wait, what? She knows me. And that's what builds trust, is that acknowledgement of a person as a human, you know, and not just as the disease or their medication or their dose, or, you know, they're a person. Anyways, I'm going to go back because otherwise I'm going to get emotional, because I wish that this was the care for my family members all the time. So I'll let you guys go on. Just somebody take over.
I'll jump in, and I'll say this from both like an education perspective and a patient perspective. From a patient perspective, you know, patients know when they're coming into an environment that's not friendly towards them. And we know that doctors don't have, you know, a bunch of time to spend with us. But if we have 10 to 15 minutes, we would rather prefer to spend that 10 to 15 minutes on something that really matters to us. And I can say from personal experience, one thing that I don't like is when I'm seeing like an endocrinologist or someone and we just jump right into the data and don't have that opening, like, well, how are you? How's everything going? Because I may be saying things that may be impacting my diabetes management that if we just start with the data is not going to put that into context for me. And that is super important. And one thing that I really loved about Miss Butler's clip is because she is it feels like she already knows, like, okay, I know what kind of like doctor I'm looking for, and that person wasn't it for her. And I think, you know, when it comes to building trust, just asking about their life story or asking like, what was your day like the past week, that can give you some tips into, okay, well, this is probably what we should talk about. So if you are an educator who's meeting with patients, I understand that, you know, clinicians have their agendas on what they would like to cover, but what the agenda that's most important is the agenda of the patient at that time.
Exactly. And if you look, we've got Christian Salas joining us. And Christian says, I believe that spending time in understanding the patient is often overlooked. And then ends with, that doesn't feel good. You know, none of us wants to be in a space with someone who is not looking at us, hasn't looked us in the face, hasn't acknowledged us by name. Like, we would never be okay with that. You know, if you're coming into a situation, just think about yourself in that space, right? You're a little apprehensive. This is something that's impacting your life and the life of your family, and you want it to be better. And no one has said so much of like, as a actual good morning, not like a, hey, what's up? Good morning, but like an actual good morning to you. How are you today, Miss Butler? And she'll tell you every time. That's what I said to her. And for a moment, she was just kind of like, what? Wait. And then she took me down kind of what would have been an uncomfortable space. I think years ago when I first started off as an educator, you know, she sat back like this, you know, her arms crossed and leaning way out, like way back, right? And then and she said, I don't want to be here. I just came here because they told me I had to come here. And I was like, well, so now that you're here, let's get to know each other. And she's like, oh, okay. So I think it's, it's spending a little bit of time, even if you don't have an extended time. Lucky for us, we're educators and we have an extended visit with our patients. But even just like 2 minutes or 3 minutes out of your 15 to really enjoy a person, the human interaction, just sets trust going and going and going right up. Yeah. And Bird says, connection matters, and it does. Any other thoughts on this?
I agree. I think that connection really matters, and talking to patients. I have a joke with one of my patients when she has type 1 diabetes and pregnancy, and whenever she sends me her blood sugar log, she knows she's going to get a call right away, because we're going to talk about it, and we're going to go, if I look at that data, I can make assumptions. I can, did she eat something? Did she treat a low in the middle of the night, and that's why she woke up high? But then when I talk to her, it's always something different. There's always a different story behind, those numbers, and we can't just look at papers and assume we know that patients are eating terribly or anything like that. Like, they might be eating perfectly fine. And in the case of diabetes and pregnancy, we know that placenta mediated insulin resistance is going to impact the blood sugars, and we have to acknowledge that, and acknowledge the patient, may already be doing everything that they possibly can, and we have to listen to what they are saying before we decide that number is high. We need to make we're going to say something, and it may not be the right thing. And so it's important to talk and communicate.
Yeah, I'll add that, patients come in guarded. It's like they're coming guarded, like kind of almost ready to fight a little bit. That they don't want to do this, they don't do that. But that human interaction in the beginning, asking them about how they're doing, can really make a difference, because you will eventually get to the things that may show up on the chart, if you get that story that Cheryl was just kind of mentioning. And I think as a patient with diabetes, like, it's always helpful for the doctor to work with me on strategies that I think could work best. Allowing the patient to kind of think through their problems, or what they're going through, and then asking them, like, hey, so what do you think is the best way to handle the situation, and how can I help you get there? Because yeah, we're experts about the disease, but they're experts on their experiences with the disease, and that has to work together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think also, too, those moments will allow you to skill build around those behaviors. And so it's kind of like, as a parent, my husband and I look for teachable moments, right? You don't harp on the thing that didn't go exactly how you expected, because, in that moment, they made a decision and they went with it. And so then you kind of reassess the decision, and say, okay, this is when things worked really well. What were you doing around the time that these things went really well? And can we bring those things to the surface, use them in a lot of different fault, you push out the less desirable situations because you're replacing them. And then you know how to handle them. Okay. So coming back to the thought of skill building, we in the diabetes care and education space often use, and we use it because it's our credentialing, the self-care behaviors. All right, so let me pull them up for you. So the self-care behaviors delineates topics and education spaces. And then within them, we help to develop skills for healthy coping, skills for healthy eating, those types of things. But oftentimes we see them in a line or ordered. But here we want you to consider as viewers and also here as a panel that it may not be a direct line, right? So there's never a direct shot to healthy eating. There's never a direct shot to healthy coping. It's kind of a choose your own adventure and then keep repeating that which worked best for you over and over again. So what do you all have to, what advice do you have for educators and even for people living with diabetes and their teams to consider when looking at all of those components of total self-care?
So something that I think about with diabetes is a lot of times it's not concrete, right? It's going to be something that's dynamic and ever changing because it's something that your life changes, right? You go through different phases. You're not in the same headspace every day your whole life. A good example is I've worked with children with diabetes. And so sometimes they go through phases with foods where they want to eat the same thing every day, and then they never want to see that food again, right? So you have to talk to parents and to families about that. Things are going to change, and I'm here to help you adjust to what's going on in your life. Another big one is diabetes and pregnancy. So we may have a mom that, during her pregnancy, she's on top of it. She's controlling her blood sugars really well because, she wants to make sure her and baby stay healthy. But then she has the baby and now she's got a million things to do, right? If she has other kids, and, she kind of puts herself maybe on the bottom of that list of things to take care of at that point. And so it's important for us as educators to say, hey, I'm hearing you say life has changed for you in the past month or the past few weeks. Let's talk about what we could do to make things a little bit easier for you, but still make sure you're taking care of yourself. So I think understanding that diabetes is kind of that wavy line that Joy always talks about, that our job is to meet you where you're at and what phase you're in of life. And I think this year especially has been a really crazy year for patients and families. And, maybe a mom is working from home with her little ones there and then trying to take care of everyone. So I think it's important for us to let patients know it's okay not to be in the same space every single day, every month, every year. So yeah, I think that's helpful to acknowledge.
Yeah, and to come back to one of the things that you said, and link it into what we were saying before, just to solidify it as a thought for all of us here and all of our viewers as well. You will not address fear or challenges in one session. So every session, it's okay to revisit those spaces again, because as you said, Michelle, things change constantly. And so, last session may have been a great session and there was no fear and very little challenges and everything was great. And you asked about it and then you moved on to a skill that was needed to grow a specific bright spot for someone. But the next time someone comes in, they may not be in that same space. So go ahead and ask again, how do you feel? How are things going? Is everything okay? And then start again from there. So every session, I think every interaction should have an acknowledgement of, and I think Christian, one of our viewers that commented before, did say, mental health and wellness is very, very important. And it shifts day to day, moment to moment, interaction to interaction. And here we go. And so it's vital to consider And I would go ahead and add to that, Christian, every single interaction. Vital to consider every interaction. Thank you see, we're always learning a little bit something from our people living with diabetes. Always. I'm always open to educate. Sometimes our educators don't have PhDs. They're the person sitting directly in front of us. So great. So let's pull up here this wonderful. So diabetes care is not always a straight line. We want to personalize it every time. And then we want to manage our own expectations and those of our patients and their families.
I love that picture. It's great.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about flexibility and expectation management. Michelle, you talked a little bit about flexibility, but Cheryl and Tiara, can you both weigh in on a flexibility approach in terms of sometimes feeling like, is there too much flexibility? You want to protect someone who's living with diabetes from complications. And is there a line, where flexibility can become, a concern? And then how do you use that flexibility to make it a strength and not necessarily a concern?
Yeah, I think that using the SMART goals, as discussed last podcast, things that are specific, measurable. So when we are developing habits and goals to self-care behaviors, we can be specific about them, right? We're going to drink 2 glasses of water, at least a day instead of 1, or we're going to maybe walk twice a week or 3 times a week instead of 1. So I think to help with the flexibility, we do have to be specific. And I think as practitioners, that's where we can guide our patients, because sometimes they may want to make every change under the sun. They may want to cut out all the carbs and start going an hour to the gym every single day. And we know that that's not going to be successful long term to continue on with. And so I feel like I'm a guide. I'm not there to kind of create your goals, but to guide you in making them effective. And so kind of that, instead of getting from point A to point B, it's that like children's dot to dot picture of like creating like a lion or a turtle. It's just messy, and we're going to move from those points and be flexible, because we know diabetes is connected to our life and everything we do, our job, our kids, our family, our stresses. And it's going to always change at every consult. Every time someone comes in, we have to address something new. And I think we have to be flexible in being able to move around. And then for people living with diabetes, I think being mindful in that experience when you are working on a habit, what are you getting out of it? What is happening? Because I think a lot of times we think going from getting our A1C, from 7 to 6.5 or 11 to, 6.5 is like, we're just thinking about that end goal, that point B, versus if we can be mindful in our habits, we can learn actually that maybe this wasn't the right goal for me. Maybe I actually needed to do something else to get there first. And so flexibility is important, but I think it does need structure.
So I want to hop in about flexibility and like that line. So kind of what Cheryl said earlier about just maybe drinking like a few glasses of water a day. I think having just maybe 1 or 2 behaviors that you are rooted in that you can follow, like sort of like as a routine or even a ritual. So I'll give an example. Taking 10 minutes to walk every morning before work. That's something that's relatively easy, and the habit has to be easy too. It has to be something that you're looking forward to each day. Otherwise, you're not gonna stick with it. But it could be Mondays, if you know that your work week is really crazy, you're taking that 10-minute walk, listening to music, and that may help you improve your day. And it's about also taking things one day at a time. So I like to say something like one meal at a time, one exercise at a time, one insulin injection at a time. And that helps you kind of build a routine, but also feeling freedom in making adjustments where needed if you're just taking it one small step going forward. And then also something else that can help you with flexibility and that routine is celebrating those small wins. And that celebration may come in the form of something like journaling. I'm a big fan of that. And taking note of just something that you're really proud of that day and carrying that momentum into the next day. And journaling doesn't have to be necessarily getting a notebook and sitting down and writing out your thoughts. It really can be just writing in your notepad on your phone. It can be recording yourself talking to yourself saying, hey, I'm really proud that I woke up and went on my 15-minute walk because that helped me be productive in my day, which helped me with my stress levels, which helped me with my blood sugar management, and I made healthier choices throughout the day. I feel great. So recognizing those small wins, finding something that you can stick to, even if it's just one thing, and then building from there is a good way to kind of manage expectations, build a routine, but also improving on flexibility if you want to try something new.
My favorite quote is, the neurons that fire together wire together, so when we continue to do habits over and over again, just drinking water, like just simple as that, we think it's such a silly habit. It's not going to get us anywhere. It's going to take a long time, but that's at the end of the day, what I see is most successful in getting to your goal is really just doing things consistently. And I think the consistency of our habits is most important versus the end goal. If we can continue to learn and grow, maybe I don't actually need to work on water intake. I need to work, I actually think I can do a little more exercise right now and a little more walking, and we can be fluid and change those patterns as we move around. I think that's really going to help, with goal setting.
And also, I think there are, things that we encounter in our daily lives that impact our blood sugar that aren't necessarily like diet or exercise related. It could be something like sleep. It could be something like, setting boundaries of when you're closing down your laptop for the workday. It's really paying attention to all the little stressors in your life, because all of those things have a impact on your blood sugar management as well. And something that I think brings me comfort personally is knowing that the habits that I've built aren't habits that happen overnight. They happen over months or years. So it's important to give yourself that kind of patience and grace to be able to take your time to reform those habits. And because when you take your time, they're likely to last longer because you're finding a strategy that really works for you.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of you guys. And listening to Reva last week when she was talking, she talked about how she kind of mastered exercising and physical activity, but that for variety, she also worked out with I think it was her sister or a friend. And so I think it's important to celebrate reaching those goals, but then also helping patients brainstorm of what could keep them interested in continuing. How can you sustain this long term? What could we think of that could keep it exciting and involved, so that it doesn't kind of burn out or die out. So yeah.
And sometimes showing up is the best thing you can do, so if you can't do 20 minutes of walking or 10 minutes, just show up. Do a minute, keep that pattern going, keep that habit. And it's funny because when we think about the most successful habits in our life, it's those things that we don't think about. It's like the waking up and showering, the brushing our teeth, the putting on the coffee pot, walking the dog. But because we feel good after we do those things. You know, we feel better when we brush our teeth. Our dog is happier and wagging its tail when, you know, we feed them. We feel motivated to do them again. And because we've been doing them all our lives, we continue on to do them. And so it's important to recognize what you're getting out of this. You know, not just better blood sugars or better A1C levels, but how are you feeling? You know, is eating maybe a little more vegetables or protein on your plate or walking, like, is it actually making your body feel better? And honing in on that to do it again the next day, you know, or the next week.
And I like what, Tiara, you said about journaling, because I think that connects to what Michelle and Cheryl are saying really well in habit building, and then recognizing your own habits and how they've improved you. So just with even like a little message to yourself, you know, like not only is going to bed at 10 o'clock improving my values, but it also makes me, you know, more alert and more aware at work, or more present for my kids, or, you know, all of the things that come along with sleeping, but then how they actually impact you in real life, so that it becomes more about the things that are really, really important to you beyond living with diabetes, right? So beyond having excellent blood glucose control, your relationship with your significant other is improved. Because, I mean, for me, you know, sleep does different things for other people, but for me, it makes me more able to focus on like what's being said between in my relationships, and I'm not as tired, I'm not as lethargic, and so I'm more present. And so for me, that would be a bigger motivator, I think, than saying, oh, well, my blood glucose values are great, and so that's what is going to keep me sleeping more. No, probably like having a conversation with my kids and being attentive is what drives me even more than that. Yeah. So let's take a look at this clip, because I do want to speak to Reva's imperfection is perfection.
So I think that when you accept imperfection as perfection, then you're allowing yourself the opportunity to actually succeed. And the reason for this is because you're taking away the stress and pressures and expectations of being perfect. So you're gaining the ability to focus 100% on your goals and break those goals up into smaller chunks without, you know, listening to all the little voices and all the other outside influences telling you that you have to do things a certain way. So it's like Miss Butler said, the imperfect is acceptable, and, you know, in a way, that's perfection.
I loved that moment, y'all, when, like, first off, I love Reva, so like big fan. I'm a fangirl of Reva. And I've told her that many times, so this is not a surprise to her. But to hear her say that in that moment was just everything. I mean, it's for someone who has loved people living with diabetes for so, so long, and seen them struggle with the, you know, with the desire and the sort of like push to be perfect every single time. Perfection is debilitating. Like, it is something that will hold you back from all your hopes and dreams, because you can't achieve it. So it always moves a little bit, because it's always changing. You know, a definition of success, a definition of perfection is always changing. And so, you know, you can't train a race, you know, horse to catch the rabbit every single, like to miss the rabbit every single time, because it demotivates them. They're never going to catch it. And so I think to expect that things while living with diabetes, while training someone with diabetes, while helping them to achieve skills is going to be perfect every time. I think from an educator point of view, from a clinician point of view, but also from a person living with diabetes point of view, I think that it's just not, it's not what we should aim for.
Yeah, I would agree. So Rava's slip was extremely powerful because it's also patients are setting themselves up for being reasonable and realistic. I think Miss Butler also talked a little bit about this, of how she knows if she sets days of the week to work out, I'm going to work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I know that I'm going to set myself up for possibly not going. And then that's a dangerous spiral to go down. If you don't show up one day, you're like, well, then I've ruined the week, right? And so she said she tells herself instead, I'm going to go 3 days this week. And so that gives her kind of going back to that flexibility, but still structure. So I think making sure patients know that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not have a rigorous set schedule for everything, but do what works for you. Let's think of what would be realistically achievable for you and what you have going on in your life. So yeah, I think that was a really powerful statement that I think we can all use in our everyday lives, accepting that things aren't going to be perfect and accepting the imperfections so that you can move forward successfully.
I loved her quote too, and it reminds me of, like, if I forget to brush my teeth, I don't just stop brushing my teeth. I don't want to feel that way, and so we have to learn how we can be consistent in our habits to and be okay with, like, on the days we don't succeed and we don't meet ourselves where we're at, we just jump back on. It's not over, it's not done with. We're gonna go brush our teeth the next day and we're gonna feel good about it, and reminding ourselves of what makes us feel good, what we get out of brushing our teeth or doing things for our diabetes management. Let that fuel you forward in your goals.
Yeah. So if you all had some takeaways for people today, what would it be? Let's begin with you, Tiara.
I would say my takeaways would be, like, to take things one day at a time. I think ending this on a conversation about perfectionism and how it can hold you back is a perfect note to end this show on. And there's no need to be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes, and you should give yourself that kind of room, because that's when you learn. Every day isn't going to be the same, so it's more important to be adaptable to your life and how it changes over time. Another takeaway is, habits, they take time to build. The habits that you have right now, they didn't just start last week, they started months ago. And maybe these new habits, you just focus on one day, one small win. Journaling, again, is something that I find to be really helpful, because it really centers you and helps connect you kind of with yourself. And another takeaway I would mention is to be your own advocate. Don't be afraid to ever use your voice. If you feel like your educator isn't understanding you, use your voice to help them understand. And then also, like, try to come prepared to your appointments, like with questions, or if you need a family member to kind of help you attend these appointments, because maybe you feel like you can't go on your own. That's also okay. Don't ever be afraid to voice what you need. So those would be my takeaways for this conversation.
Thank you, Tara. Michelle?
Yeah, so kind of feeding off of what Tiara said, as an educator and diabetes care and education specialist, making an environment for your patient where they don't feel scared to tell you what they need. So making sure we make it a safe space, and just start the session with, how are you? Like Joy said, take a moment, take a breath. And as a provider, making sure we take a breath between patients too, and realize this is my whole next patient. Let's start fresh. Let's find out where this person's at, right? Let's not carry over from the previous patient and so forth. Let's find a safe space for this patient that they feel comfortable telling me what they need so that I can effectively advocate for them amongst the healthcare team as well.
Yeah, I love that, Michelle and Tiara, exactly what you said, I agree with. And my main takeaway is when you're goal setting, for the new year, be mindful and be present, in that experience, because that's what's gonna get you to figure out your true needs at the end of the day. And then, if you decide your goals change, be vocal about it. Come to your next session and talk to your diabetes care and education specialist or your doctor. This is what I need. This is what I need to work on, and be a part of your care team. And I think, you don't need to be fantastic at the start. You just need to be there, just show up, could keep that habit of showing up to appointments, and, keep that flow. That consistency is so important.
Yeah. And then I think for all of us as educators, to also take home the same messages, right? So the same messages of imperfection versus perfection, of giving yourself space and grace to make, decisions and flexibility. And then also to ask for what you need, as an educator. Do you need a little bit more time with your patients? Do you need help? I guess I'm lucky in that, my boss hears me as well. And so everyone should be an imperfect advocate for themselves, right? So be an advocate for yourself as well. So thank you all for being here to share. It's been really great to be a part of this conversation, and it's always good to feel like we're all in the same space and we're all like rooting for the same team. So thank you all for taking time this morning. I know it's your family time and whatnot. And so thank you very much for being here on My Diabetes HQ Live, and plan to be back, because once you're part of the fold, you're coming back. And also to all the viewers out there, Christian, Kamla, Serena, Bird, everybody who's been on today sending great comments. Thank you all for being here. We have a quick survey on YouTube and Facebook where we'd like you to leave your feedback on the program, as well as recommendations for future episodes. Please make My Diabetes HQ Live better by filling out that survey. And remember that the recommendations for care must be personalized. So thank you so much to our guests. And we urge you to communicate your challenges and your wins to your clinical team. To our viewers, we hope that this conversation has encouraged you to consider how to shape your clinical relationships and how to personalize care planning. Mark your calendars. We will be broadcasting every Saturday, 10 a.m. Central Time and 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Join us next Saturday for the part 3 of this diabetes inception, when another group of people living with diabetes will react to diabetes care and education specialists reacting to people living with diabetes. Have a great day.